Red Dead Redemption 2 is one of the most realistic games ever made, so I decided to book a vacation here, and I mean an actual vacation. I'm staying in 3 of Red Dead's most iconic destinations, because after hundreds of hours of treating these towns like places to rob, fight, and ride straight through, I've never stopped to find out whether they're actually worth visiting. But Red Dead is only half the vacation, because this week I'm traveling across America to stay in the actual places that inspired the game. At every stop I'll live the same day twice. My in-game hotel, my activities, and even my meals will become my real-life itinerary. I want to know whether the world of Red Dead still exists somewhere in America, or if Rockstar's version is all that's left. I want to feel like a cowboy. And finding out begins in the biggest city in the game. Welcome to Saint Denis, also known as New Orleans. I cannot believe they designed a city after a video game. Behind me is the Bastille Saloon and the first hotel that we're going to be checking into today. It's locked. I ran off to find the closest thing I could to the Bastille Saloon. While back in Red Dead, I began the check-in process at hotel number 1. In we go. Oops, that was a bit aggressive. Our first hotel room is actually located directly above the Bastille Saloon, a place where Saint Denis' upper crust can eat, drink, and generally enjoy being richer than everybody else. $1 for a room, now that's a deal. Because Arthur and I are taking the exact same vacation, I want to know who's getting ripped off more. In 1899, a dollar went far. Today it goes nowhere. Adjusted for 2026 inflation, my Red Dead hotel has cost $40.24. Must be nice. Okay, so this is actually the first hotel we're going to be checking into. This is Place d'Armes. Place d'Armes sits right in the middle of the French Quarter in New Orleans. And honestly, look at this place. This genuinely feels like I just walked into Saint Denis. The Bastille Saloon operates on the honor system, 0 room keys. Place d'Armes gave me a key card. So in the competition for the most cowboy-looking key, this piece of plastic takes an early lead. Entering my room at the Bastille Saloon, I was immediately impressed. Comfy bed, wash basin, spittoon. The tiny details in this room are incredible. We've even got a massive chandelier lit entirely by open flames. No wonder New Orleans burnt down twice. Bible check? Bible. But there is one major historical omission. Fancy hotels in 1899 had indoor toilets called close stools. They actually exist elsewhere in this game, just weirdly not in this room. I don't know what to tell you, Arthur. You're gonna have to hold it. They didn't have a toilet, but they did have a public bath. 25 cents, or $10 today. Arthur is now squeaky clean, and no, we did not pay for the extra services. We're on a budget. Time to see how a $300 modern hotel compares to the Wild West. Ah yes, 2 beds with foam rollers, a Keurig, a mini fridge, and ArthurMorgan's absolute favorite, a Roku TV. The immersion is palpable. Bible check. Oh, this isn't a drawer. The only historical thing in here is this Victorian coal fireplace. It doesn't work. But then I checked the bathroom, and we had a problem. Oh no, there's only a shower. ArthurMorgan doesn't shower, which means I don't shower. If I can't find a place with a bathtub in any of the places we're staying, this is going to be a rough trip. Alright, a full day in Red Dead is exactly 48 minutes long. We've got a lot to fit in 48 minutes. I was outside for exactly 2 seconds and it already felt like I'd stepped into the video game. Horse posts, street signs on the sidewalk, whatever this thing is. This boat looks perfect for a fine night of debauchery. Remember those 1899 indoor toilets Arthur was missing? Found them. They sure knew how to have fun back then. And because I can only eat food that exists in the game, I needed provisions. Headley's assorted biscuits, Schmidt's canned salmon, canned peas, canned corn, Schiffer beer, a perfectly balanced diet. If I failed to find something Arthur could eat, these were my emergency rations. With my provisions secured and dropped off, it was time for my first actual Saint Denis activity, riding the trolley. In Red Dead, this went poorly. In real life, slightly easier. I sat back and enjoyed the slow, majestic pace of 19th century public transit, taking in the sights and the sounds and the absolute peak of Saint Denis and New Orleans culture, right up until it was time to get off. As you can see, I'm playing Red Dead as a low-honor son of a bitch. So, to balance the scales, I have to play my real life in complete contrast. For every low-honor act Arthur commits, I have to do a good deed in real life. Wish me luck. I played Red Dead like an absolute psycho. I started by thanking my real-life driver and leaving him alive. Our first official stop was the cemetery. In Red Dead, the gates are wide open. In real life, it's strictly by appointment only. But I managed to snag the last spot on a walking tour. Walking through here, Rockstar's attention to detail is honestly breathtaking. This is probably my favorite video game graveyard of all time, and seeing it in person felt weirdly special, and it completely grounds you in the history of the city. And just like the game, all the tombs are built above ground. The reason being New Orleans floods so much that if you bury people normally, their bones would literally wash down the street. As the tour wrapped up, it was time to officially balance out Arthur's casual trolley murder. I tipped our tour guide an extra $20. On my way out, I ended up talking to the woman who sold me my ticket. Her name was Fidelia. I was way too awkward to ask if I could film her, but we had a surprisingly deep conversation. And right before I walked away, she looked at me and on God said that by the end of this trip, I would find my true purpose, so no pressure. It was close to 7 p.m. My in-game and real-life health cores were draining, meaning I was starving. To save time, I tried to steal a horse outside the graveyard, got murdered, and had to wait an entire in-game day for 7 p.m. to roll around. Arthur ate where we're staying, the Bastille Saloon. The menu promises prime rib, potato dauphinoise, and a spring salad. But if you actually look at Arthur's plate, it's just prime rib, potatoes, and peas. So there's some room for interpretation. He ordered the plate for $5 plus a Schiffer beer for 50 cents. Adjusted for inflation, Arthur's dinner just cost $221.32, which is insane, but also gives me hope that Arthur's vacation may end up costing more than mine. Welcome to the Rib Room. Look at how fancy this place is.
Right here?
I tried to get Arthur's exact plate.
Do you have any green peas? No, okay.
Instead, I ordered the 28-day prime rib.
$65.
The Bastille Saloon has French wine behind the bar, so I ordered an $18 glass of French wine. Yes, I drank beer in the game. Don't ask me why I was so strict about the green peas, but completely changed my drink order. I think I just got intimidated by how fancy this place was and wanted the waiter to think that I belonged there. Also, the in-game saloon has oyster towers on the tables. You can't actually eat them in the game, but they exist, so I ordered half a dozen oysters for $18. I'm allergic to some shellfish, but I'm pretty sure oysters are okay. The oysters were delicious. At least tonight they were.
Okay, meal number 1.
And would you look at this? A perfect one-to-one recreation of Arthur's plate.
Unfortunately, I don't think I can have the horseradish because I don't remember seeing any horseradish in Red Dead Redemption 2.
I also ordered the palm puree on the side, which turns out to just be a fancy word for mashed potatoes. But honestly, this was one of the best things I've ever put into my mouth. The final bill with tip was $147.93. Did my 18% tip move my honor bar up? It was getting late, but before I could finally go back to my hotel, Red Dead had one more stop planned for me. Doyle's Tavern. Now this is Arthur's kind of place. I walked in and ordered a shot of whiskey. The plan was get a little tipsy, listen to the piano player, and end the day peacefully. Instead, I accidentally pulled out my gun. Ah, shit. I panicked, tried to put the gun away, and accidentally pulled out my knife. And while trying to put the knife away, I accidentally murdered a man. Ah, shit. So what was supposed to be a night of singing and cheer ended with Arthur once again killing half the Saint Denis police force. Which left me with 2 problems. Arthur had once again destroyed his honor, and I still needed a real-world version of Doyle's. Luckily, I found the old Absinthe House. The old Absinthe House has been here since 1807. It survived Prohibition and supposedly has a secret room where Andrew Jackson planned a battle with an actual pirate. I sat down and asked the bartender for a shot of whiskey. He told me he'd give me one of these flaming shots instead. Apparently, a dude named Gavin and his friends ordered them, but Gavin never showed up to claim them, so I took a few. Also, the bartender said they were on the house. Feeling a little warm, I opted for a beer next, a Yingling from 1829. But as I was sitting there drinking my historically accurate beer, I noticed something on the bar. Look at this tap. It's an antique absinthe dripping fountain. I wasn't sure if it was the flaming shots messing with my head, but it looked incredibly familiar.
Is this from the game?
Look at this. That is the exact same tap. Did some artist at Rockstar walk into this exact bar, take photos of this tap, and then go back and model it for the game? That level of obsession is beautiful. It felt like the game world and the real world were bleeding into each other. Actually, looking back on the footage, they might have bled together a little too much. I put Arthur to bed in the Bastille Saloon, and judging by this final clip, I somehow navigated myself back to the Place d'Armes. I survived my first day, but Saint Denis is also the easiest place on this trip, because tomorrow I am leaving civilization behind. Waking up the next morning, Arthur said a quick, heartfelt goodbye to the rich people of the Bastille Saloon, then grabbed a quick breakfast at Horner & Co. General Store. 2 cans of Schmidt's baked beans at $1.20 each. That is $96.58 on cold beans. What a sucker. My morning started slightly differently. Step 1, a quick stop at CVS for Pepto-Bismol for my lightning diarrhea from the oysters. Is this what Fidelia meant by finding my purpose? Step 2, Monty's on the Square. In Red Dead, you can't have a cup of coffee unless you're at camp. I let Arthur suffer through that on his own. My server Lee noticed what I was doing. Turns out Lee's a massive Red Dead fan. They didn't have canned beans on the menu, but he had the kitchen make me this. I know what you're thinking. This looks like a hot bowl of ass, but it was straight up one of the best breakfasts I've ever had in my life. So big shout out to Lee. Arthur and I both had somewhere to be. He had a train to catch and I had a plane. But before leaving Lemoyne, there was one final thing we had to do. In each place I'm staying on this trip, I need to collect one souvenir that encapsulates my experience. Arthur headed out on horseback and I headed out on coach back. Our destination was the countryside. Arthur rode south, leaving the city behind for swamps and enormous plantations. In real life, I was doing the exact same thing. About an hour outside of New Orleans, we pulled into Oak Alley Plantation, also known as Braithwaite Manor. And come on, look at this. Rockstar basically just copy-pasted this exact property. In fact, it's actually so identical that my video game muscle memory kicked in from my playthrough. Arthur, meanwhile, continued to greet the local caretakers. I guess blasting henchmen count as high honor. So to balance out Arthur's high honor deed, I shot this family with my phone. I took a photo of them. You're welcome, guys. But now for the souvenir. In commemoration of the swamp, I wanted to take the swamp with me. We got a skin an alligator. Okay, there's a gator. Here we go. Ah, shit. Being out on an actual Louisiana swamp is completely surreal. It feels exactly like you're inside the game. I'd never seen gators in real life, and I gotta tell you, what a lizard, or whatever it is. Dinosaur? Arthur, meanwhile, attempted a second alligator, and got completely torn to shreds. Finally, on the third attempt, Arthur was able to bag the prized alligator skin. Realizing there was absolutely no way I was going to physically fight one of these dinosaurs in the swamp, I opted for the next best thing, securing my first souvenir of the trip. However, I made sure to avenge the many deaths of Arthur. I got you, Arthur. Chapter 1 officially closed. I survived the swamp. With my souvenir secured, it was time to travel to the next stop. Arthur got on his insanely priced $10 train, which, sorry to say, runs him $400 in today's market, and I headed for my plane, which sadly cost me about the same. Saint Denis had showed me that Red Dead's world still existed, but I still didn't feel anything like ArthurMorgan, besides the fact that we're both getting absolutely fleeced by our in-game economies. Which is why stop number 2 mattered. If Saint Denis was peak civilization, Valentine is the actual Wild West. It's a hardworking livestock town built entirely in the mud. If you want to feel like a cowboy, this is the spot to do it. Which is why my real life counterpart is...
CODY, Wyoming!
CODY is the undisputed cowboy capital of the world. It is rugged, it is wild, and it is the closest thing to Valentine that still exists in modern America. Founded in 1896 by Colonel William Buffalo Bill Cody. If Red Dead was real life, this guy is a legendary gunslinger with a maxed out honor bar. Arthur arrived on his massive steam train, I arrived by a Volkswagen Atlas. First order of business, Arthur and I were starving from our day of traveling. Arthur grabbed some Headley's biscuits, a cheese wedge, and some salted beef. This really is a bizarre food economy. I also saw this sign for pickled eggs outside the saloon, but as you can see, these good old boys had an issue with Arthur being on the porch, so instead of eating eggs, Arthur broke some eggs. In real life, I stuck to the cowboy diet. I managed to find salted beef, a proper Wyoming cheese wedge, and in honor of Arthur's botched egg attempt, I grabbed some pickled quail eggs. And what's crazy is, my real life played out almost exactly like Arthur's. Cowboys literally blasting each other outside the grocery store. The Old West is alive and well in CODY. These guys are really dead. CODY's crazy. With lunch sorted, it was time for check-in. In Valentine, Arthur rented a room for $1 at the Saints Hotel. He accidentally pulled a gun on the front desk guy, but we managed to smooth it over. And we have actual physical keys here. I'm already loving the vibe of this hotel. It's a little rough around the edges, a little scrappy, but has massive charm. Look at that stove! And I actually found its real-life counterpart in CODY at Old Trail Town. All this stuff that I'm used to seeing as set dressing in Red Dead was just sitting there, preserved, including this potbelly stove.
Whoa, this is so cool.
Is it just me or did stuff just look better back then?
Hotel number 2 is the Irma. This is Buffalo Bill's hotel.
Guys, look at this hotel. This is one of the coolest buildings my body has ever been in. I was actually incredibly fortunate to get a room here. This place is booked to the gills year-round. I tried booking and they were totally full, but they called me with a last-minute cancellation. Someone's watching out for me, and that cancellation was about to get even luckier. Check-in was incredibly smooth, no guns were drawn, and I got a physical room key, taking the first place spot for our most cowboy-like key. But as I arrived at my room, I realized something insane.
Wait a minute, what? I got Buffalo Bill's room?
When Buffalo Bill built this hotel, this was the specific suite that he exclusively stayed in. This is an impossible room to get. Meanwhile, the front desk guy in Red Dead told me I needed to wash up if I was going to impress anybody here, so I prepaid for a bath and checked out my room. Okay, this is modest. Big bed, wood-burning fireplace, Bible check, no Bible, wash basin for Arthur's face, and a nice scenic view of the town hangings. How nice. And right out the back door we have an outhouse. Back in reality, I stepped inside my suite. Now, I'm not the type of person who gets a feeling very often. I don't walk into rooms and think I can feel a presence or whatever, but walking into the Buffalo Bill room had an energy to it.
Oh, thank God we have a bathtub. Look at this toilet. Ah, this must be where Buffalo Bill watched Netflix. This must be where Buffalo Bill watched Disney Plus. 2 TVs. Hey, look, it's the actual wash basin. Do you think anyone's used this since Buffalo Bill?
Arthur had his bath. I had my bath. Thank God. Arthur, pig that he is, spent an extra 50 cents to not have to wash himself. I couldn't afford the help. Arthur ate his snack. I ate my snack. Pickled quail eggs? Honestly, not bad. With our cores full, it was time to hit the town. Now, what's the first thing you do when you enter a cowboy town? You gotta look, act, and feel like a cowboy. So Arthur went down to the local gunsmith. If you want to survive Valentine, you need the staples of the Old West. First, the Schofield revolver, which is based heavily on the real-world Smith & Wesson Model 3. Second, the Lancaster repeater, which is essentially a Winchester. Okay, Arthur, I think you should sit down for this. Those 2 guns you just purchased cost you $8,812. That makes me feel a bit better about my spending habits. Arthur headed out back to try some target practice with his new hardware when he saw a man being bullied on the steps of Keen's saloon. And if anyone's doing the bullying, it's Arthur. Which was apparently enough to spawn the local authorities yet again. Okay, how do I recreate this in the real world?
Let's go shoot some guns.
If there is a place in the United States that has literally any gun you could ever possibly be looking for, it's Wyoming. And just as I suspected, they had the exact hardware I needed to match Arthur. This is a Smith & Wesson Model 3, basically the real gun behind Arthur's Schofield. Cavalry soldiers loved it because you could reload it one-handed while riding a horse. I'm not riding a horse, and I am a Canadian. This is the first time I've ever even seen a gun in person, let alone fired one.
This is a real bullet?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Finger off, hammer back. This one's for real. Nice. Almost a perfect bullseye though, dude. Come on. So yeah, there's a little bit of recoil.
After that first shot, I was actually really getting into it. The adrenaline was pumping. I felt like I was finally shaking off my soft city tourist exterior. I actually thought I might be an alright shot, which made me feel just a tiny bit closer to being a cowboy.
Might have taken a little chunk out of the bottom, but nope. But yeah, either way.
No need to focus too much on that. Next up was the Winchester 73, often called the gun that won the West. I don't know if I'm hitting anything, but I really like the feeling of shooting it. It starts to feel like a natural extension of you. I also thought I was absolutely ripping through these rounds. Then the instructor showed me how you're actually supposed to use it. But there was still one more box to check. If I was going to recreate Arthur's shootout with the law exactly, I needed to match his firepower.
Now, do we have anything bigger?
The Gatling gun. It was the first successful machine gun in history, capable of firing hundreds of rounds a minute simply by turning a hand crank. Arthur mowed down the law, I mowed down a paper target. I gotta tell you, there's something in that Wyoming air, because I left the CODY firearms experience smelling like gunpowder and feeling significantly more like a cowboy, which meant there were a couple things left to do to complete my Arthur transition. After being fitted for that hat, I walked out of that shop feeling like a hardened CODY local. That is until a guy on the street called me fancy pants 5 minutes later. I knew the hat and the iron weren't enough to hide the truth. There was only one thing left that could legitimize me. Out in the heartlands just outside of Valentine, Arthur found a wild Mustang. To claim it, he had to break it. It is a violent, terrifying battle of wills between man and beast. He made it look easy. So with my new hat secured, I drove my VW to a local ranch to face a beast of my own. I was on a horse exactly one time as a kid and my head swelled up to the size of a hot air balloon. But by the grace of modern medicine, I took a heavy-duty doctor-prescribed antihistamine and hope for the best. They hadn't told me her actual name yet, so I named her Cinderella.
That's a good girl.
I don't know shit about horses outside of Red Dead, so I just used game mechanics. I kept petting my horse and calling her a good girl, hoping to build up our bond level so she wouldn't buck me off and send me into these rocks below. We got to the top of the peak and the horse guide informed me that my horse was actually a male.
Sorry about all that girl stuff back there. That's a good boy.
But what started as a desperate attempt to survive actually turned into something else. I really did feel a bond with my horse. My life was in Cinderella's hands and I'd started to trust him. For the first time on this trip, I wasn't really thinking about Red Dead anymore. I was having a real genuine moment. But as we neared the starting corral and I saw the next hour's reservations waiting in line, I remembered what this actually was. I wasn't crossing the frontier. I wasn't depending on this horse to get me home. I was a tourist who paid for the 5 p.m. trail ride. And there was a 6 p.m. cosplaying cowboy waiting right behind me. Still, my horse and I had been through a lot. I said my final goodbyes to Cinderella.
I'm gonna miss you, buddy.
And decided to find out his actual name before we parted ways forever.
What's this horse's name again?
I'm not sure.
Oh, you're not sure.
I paid the $50 for the trail ride and asked if the horses ever get treats like oatcakes. He said they did not. I gave him an extra $10 and asked if he could, and he said he would. So I hope you got your oatcake, Cinderella. Arthur finished the evening with lamb's fry and a beer. There was no lamb to be found in CODY, so I headed to the Irma Hotel's buffet and assembled the closest Red Dead dinner I could. Prime rib, again, bison, potatoes, a bread roll, and horseradish. Horseradish does not exist in Red Dead. A day earlier, I was interrogating waiters about green peas because I wanted every ingredient to match Arthur's plate exactly. Now I was eating horseradish because I wanted horseradish. After dinner, Arthur headed over to Keaton's Saloon for a drink and a game of 5-finger fillet. I set up my own game of 5-finger fillet, and honestly, I think I was even faster than Arthur. Here's the footage slowed down so you can really appreciate my eye-hand coordination. Meanwhile, it had started pouring rain in Valentine, so Arthur ducked inside the local tent to watch a movie. Unfortunately, CODY wasn't showing any motion pictures that night from 1899 or any other time period, but there was something better. the rodeo. And if there was one place I needed to end my day in CODY, it was here. Because all day I'd been purchasing individual pieces of cowboyhood, but being in those stands made the difference incredibly obvious. These people weren't pretending to be cowboys for a YouTube video. For a lot of them, this was just their life. These are people who grew up riding horses, families who've been coming here for generations, people getting thrown into the dirt, getting back up and doing it again tomorrow. And that made me feel a little better. Because even if I was doing a terrible job becoming a cowboy, CODY had at least answered one question for me. There's still places where being a cowboy wasn't something you just did for an afternoon. I still wasn't sure if I could ever actually survive in that world, or if I was destined to experience the whole thing safely from the bleachers. But I had one final leg of this trip to figure it out. For our final morning in Valentine, Arthur and I kept it simple. Oatmeal. Mine was $3.50, Arthur's was $120.72. With our cores filled once again, it was time to leave the towns behind entirely. No more buffets, no more air conditioning. We were heading into the wilderness to sleep in the dirt. Arthur whistled for his horse, set a waypoint for the deep woods outside of Strawberry, and began the long journey into the mountains. I flew home and rented a trusty steed of my own, a Tesla. I thought I was getting a Honda. Now, navigating the harsh, untamed wilderness can be exhausting for a cowboy. But luckily, Arthur and I both share a secret weapon. In Red Dead, if you hold down the cinematic camera button, your horse goes into autopilot. It just follows the trail on its own while you sit back and enjoy the scenery. In real life, this Tesla apparently does the same thing. My steed is currently driving itself while I sit in 70-degree air conditioning listening to a podcast. Arthur arrived at Lake Owanjila, and would you look at this view? Camping is honestly one of my favorite things to do in Red Dead. If anything makes me wish I could actually live in this time period, it's embodied by the camping experience. You pick a quiet spot off the road and it's just you, the fire, and nature. To match Arthur's spot, I drove my Tesla deep into the Adirondacks to Fish Creek Pond.
Here's a tutorial on the fastest way to set up a tent. Who wants a room tour?
Okay, so like Arthur, I'm going with minimum ground cushion and my 100% pure silk pillowcase. Give me a break, guys, I'm trying. When Arthur needs a fire, it starts instantly. I had to buy firewood on the side of the road. I didn't have any kindling, so I tried to start the fire with just the logs and some wet brush I'd found on the ground. And my fire was dying fast. Luckily, I had some bourbon to help get the flames going. The thing that actually saved me was the hunting knife I bought in CODY. I used it to shave down some kindling, which ultimately saved the fire. Arthur cooked a pristine cut of big game meat by holding his hunting knife directly over the open flame. I also cooked some big game meat. The gas station I bought it from called it a hot dog. But sitting there alone by the fire was probably the closest I'd gotten to what I actually love about camping in Red Dead. There was nothing to do, just the fire and the woods. I'd never actually sat around a campfire completely alone before. I barely have any footage of my camping experience because I did just end up sitting with my thoughts. And after spending this entire trip desperately trying to recreate things from a video game, this was probably the first time that didn't really need recreating. A fire in 1899 looked exactly like this. At this point, I genuinely thought this was going to be my favorite night of the trip. Arthur packed it in for a peaceful night under the stars. I read my book for a bit, then went to bed.
It's 6:30 a.m. It is pouring rain. I just want a cup of coffee, but I can't get this f***ing fire started.
I ended up sleeping for maybe 20 minutes the entire night. I woke up to rain and a pounding headache. I'd planned to cook this authentic cowboy oatmeal over the fire this morning, but without a fire that was useless. So I had a can of peaches I also brought from home. Look how happy I look. Meanwhile, Arthur enjoyed a hot cup of coffee as the sun rose over West Elizabeth, ready for the final stop on this vacation. Strawberry. The ride to Strawberry took until noon. Arthur caught a perch for his lunch on the way. I tried to recreate this and, yeah. I didn't catch any fish. So I bought a Snowburger's chocolate bar and some more salted beef. I was feeling really, really good. But before we check into our final hotel, we need to address the elephant in the room, the location of Strawberry. So there is a literal town called Strawberry in California, but there's a massive plot hole. In the game, California is talked about as a completely separate place, which means Rockstar Strawberry cannot be in California. So why did I fly to the complete opposite side of the country to the Adirondacks? Two reasons: the history and the sticks. In Red Dead, Strawberry started as this tiny isolated camp for lumberjacks. But by 1899, the mayor is desperately trying to rebrand it into a luxury mountain resort for the rich tourists. That exact same story played out right here in the Adirondacks. The Adirondacks successfully became the exact luxury mountain resort that Strawberry's mayor was trying to build. Which brings us to the second reason I chose this place, the Sticks, and our final hotel on the trip, the Welcome Center. Of all three hotels Arthur stayed in, this is easily the fanciest. The entire building is designed to remind you that you're in the mountains. Even the staircase looks like somebody walked into the forest and just started grabbing sticks. Arthur checked checked in with reception. This place is so exclusive that there's only 2 rooms, Arthur's and the mayor's. I actually like the mayor's room more, so I'll decide later where I'm sleeping. And then there was my hotel.
Final stop, the Welcome Center.
I meant to say Lake Placid Lodge. I was very tired. One night here is $983. I can't afford to be here. The cabins have the same exposed timber construction, the same stone fireplaces in the lobby, and the same strange obsession with building furniture out of trees. Even the chandeliers follow the exact same philosophy. Arthur has mounted deer and elk. I've got dead animals everywhere. They're selling you the feeling of being out in the wilderness without actually making you suffer through being in the wilderness, which after the previous night sounded f***ing incredible. I checked in with Sebastian at the front desk, who was super cool. He told me the room's stone fireplace was already prepped and required exactly 1 strike of a match to light. That sounds nice. My key came out of this antique apothecary cabinet, and we have our official first place winner for most cowboy looking key. Let's take a look inside the room. Yeah, this is the nicest place I've ever been in. The whole room smelled like wood smoke. 24 hours ago, I was sleeping on the ground, soaked from the rain, unable to make coffee. Now I had 2 coffee makers, a stone fireplace, a king-size bed, unlimited free alcohol, and some sort of infrared bathroom situation. Is this a rich person thing? It was pouring rain outside, so while ArthurMorgan headed out to take a canoe ride, I decided to take a bath, put on the complimentary robe and slippers, and do something I've never done before. I ordered room service. In for a penny, in for a pound, as they say. I can eat everything on this plate but the grapes. It was one of the best things I've ever tasted in my life. Now it was time to test Sebastian's promise. Let's see if this truly is a one-match fire. Well, holy shit. Sitting in my expensive lodge room watching the fire was a remarkably different experience than sitting beside the one in the woods the night before. Yesterday, starting a fire had taken a lot. Here, someone had done all the hard work for me. This lodge was basically Red Dead Redemption in hotel form. I got the fantasy without the true effort it takes. So while Arthur went fishing in the upper Montana River, I walked to the lodge's restaurant and ordered a beautifully plated salmon and a beer. And by the time we both made it back to our rooms, neither of us had much trouble falling asleep. When I woke up on the final morning of the trip, it was still pouring rain. Every part of me wanted to stay in bed until checkout, and 4 days earlier I probably would have, but Arthur wouldn't. So I put the wool suit back on, walked outside, and dragged a canoe down to the water. And then a miracle. The sun came out. I like to think it's because of my high honor. And sitting out there, I started thinking about the question that sent me on this whole stupid vacation. Does the world of Red Dead Redemption still exist? And after traveling thousands of miles looking for it, I think it does. Just not all in one place anymore. Some of it survived in the buildings of New Orleans. Some of it survived in CODY. Some of it's sitting in museums, old hotels, and cabins. And some of it never disappeared at all. A fire still looks like a fire. I could pretend to live in 1899, but whenever I wanted, I could go home. And I'm incredibly lucky for that, because I learned something else on this trip. You can never recreate the circumstances that made these people cowboys, because the entire point of the modern world was to make those circumstances unnecessary. The Wild West is gone, but the world it was made from is still here. There was still one piece of business left, my final souvenir. At every stop, I'd been trying to bring home some little piece of the place, but for the last one, a journal felt right. Because I think the best souvenir from this trip wasn't something that made me look more like ArthurMorgan. It was finally having a few stories of my own worth writing down. I don't know if that's the purpose Fidelia had in mind, but I think she'd be happy knowing I figured something out. Thanks for watching. It looks like both of our economies are fucked.